Valve holds several beloved game franchises. They have Portal, Half-Life, Team Fortress, Counter-Strike, Dota, and a lot more. I'm sure you know how long we've been waiting for sequels like Half-Life 3, but I think there are some games with overlooked sequel potential. What if tomorrow Valve woke up with some chronic need to make as many sequels as possible, like Ubisoft? Here are some ideas. A sequel to almost every game Valve has ever made. And because this is YouTube, I will make it a tier list based on how much I'd like Valve to make each game. For simplicity, I'll mostly go in the order that games were released in, starting with Half-Life. I know what you're thinking. Half-Life already has a sequel, it's called Half-Life 2. But I don't think Valve has entirely exhausted the sequel potential, or maybe the spin off potential, that Half-Life has. Half-Life's final chapter visits an alien dimension called Zen, and we learn that Black Mesa has been sending scientists to explore Zen for some time. The Zen chapter was not very well received, but the fan-made Black Mesa game shows what a modern take on Zen might look like. I think an alien-like horror experience in the shoes of a Black Mesa scientist exploring Zen after the events of Half-Life 1 could offer something unique and show just how far games have evolved since 1998. In terms of the tier list, I'll put this one at A tier. I'm a fan of Half-Life. I would love to play this game. So I did say every Valve game earlier, so I'm actually going to have to cover another one that already has a sequel. This time, Team Fortress Classic. Uh, this time, my work is already done for me because Valve had another idea for Team Fortress 2, other than the Team Fortress 2 that we know today. So we could just use that for this hypothetical sequel. This one would have the subtitle Brotherhood of Arms, and unlike the real Team Fortress games, Brotherhood of Arms would have been much more realistic, using a few weapons you might recognize from Counter Strike. There would also have been two additional classes: the Commander, which would give orders and coordinate the team, and the Officer, which would lead attacks and affect team morale. Yeah, there's a morale system in this game, and it would affect your accuracy. Also, morale would get set to 0 if the officer was killed. Like Counter Strike, Brotherhood of Arms would not allow players to respawn after death, during a match at least. As you can see, this game would be a massive departure from the Team Fortress that we know. Also, it would have used much more realistic map settings, including the Middle East and Italy. So you see, it's definitely stepping into Counter Strike's territory, and for that reason, I think I'll give this one a C tier. Okay, this is going to be the first game that doesn't already have a sequel. It's Half-Life Opposing Force. You might not count it as its own game, but I will be counting it. So, see, after Opposing Force, there was another expansion pack planned for Half-Life under the title Hostile Takeover, and in it you play as the character similar to the G-Man, testing potential candidates for something. These candidates would have been the Team Fortress characters, and you would be leading them through escaping from a facility called Allied Processing, some kind of subsidiary for Black Mesa. The game would have also included some unique enemies, including a big hound eye and zombie monkeys. By the way, this will not be the last time you hear about zombie monkeys in this list. I actually think this is a really interesting concept for a Half-Life spin-off. I know it's not exactly a Opposing Force sequel, but it would have been released after Opposing Force, so it technically counts. I think I'll give this one B tier, just because it's not quite as interesting to me as the alien survival Zen idea, so I'll give it B tier. Okay, what's next? Ricochet. What to do with Ricochet? You might not know this game. It's a Tron-esque multiplayer game with a lot of jumping. I know people like to meme on Ricochet for being a weak concept and one of Valve's worst performing games ever, but there could be some potential if the movement mechanics were more developed. Many are aware of the movement tech in Gold Source and Source Engine games, but I don't know that Valve has ever openly embraced that in a title that they've released. A proper physics engine in Source or Source 2 offers more advanced play, and Ricochet 2 would still be very experimental, weird, but it has a lot of potential. Um, I think I'll give this one B tier. I actually think this is a really interesting idea. By the way, we are thinking about playing Ricochet on a live stream sometime soon, so follow me on Twitch if you want to see that. Okay, back to games that already have sequels. Counter Strike. I was going to skip this one, but apparently Counter Strike has some bizarre third party spin offs. What you see now is not Minecraft, that is Counter Strike Nexon Studio, and it has a built in map editor, not Hammer, like its own built in map editor, and it has a zombie mode. I have a feeling that Valve has almost nothing to do with this game, and probably does not want me to know about it. Reviews are mixed, and I have not played this. Actually, I don't think anyone plays this, but there is some room for a sequel here, just barely. Most of the Left 4 Dead games are just about surviving zombie hordes. So, what if we took the terrorists out of Counter Strike and replaced them with Left 4 Dead zombies? Maybe do some rebalancing so that 5 zombies have a real challenge and make it competitive. It could be interesting. But that's only could be interesting. I still think this might go in C tier. However, Half-Life Blue Shift is very easy to make a sequel for that. This game seems to be mostly canon to the Half-Life series, and Barney Calhoun appears in later games. Half-Life 2's plot has an easy setup for a Blue Shift sequel. Both games have Barney protecting a scientist. In one case, it's Dr. Rosenberg, and in the other, it is Dr. Kleiner. So we could just have another Half-Life spin-off where Barney is keeping the Combine from discovering Dr. Kleiner in City 17, and the end could actually have just his perspective of the uprising. We also don't know where he is after episode 1 because his only voice line in episode 2 is apparently not supposed to be there. There were actually some rumors about a possible Half-Life Barney game after Half-Life Alyx, so this could still end up happening, but I think it's unlikely. As for the concept, I think I'll give it B tier. Okay, another one that I was going to skip, and it actually, I have an idea for it. So, it's Deathmatch Classic. The sequel I will title Deathmatch Celebration Gold Source. Yeah, Gold Source is like the subtitle because there might be multiple of these. Uh, Idea is that you take maps, characters, and weapons from several Gold Source games and then just kind of mash them together into a single deathmatch game. Think of it like the Smash Bros. Of the Gold Source engine. I don't know if this is something I would play necessarily, so I'll give it C tier, especially because you can kind of already do this with some of the existing mods. Yeah, C tier. Okay, next is Day of Defeat, and I will actually be combining it with Day of Defeat Source just because these are the same game on different engines. So sequel here is easy. These games are mostly just multiplayer games, so just make it again, but with modern standards. So remaster the maps, add a few new ones, rebalance the weapons, that sort of thing. It's kind of like what Valve has done with Counter Strike over the years. Not an amazing concept, and I don't know how many people are interested in that because it's basically what Counter Strike does. Uh, Maybe C tier again. Yeah. Uh, I will also be skipping the rest of the Source Engine ports because uh, most of them are the same. However, I do want to cover Half-Life Source, mostly because it's remembered as a hastily made, buggy port of Half-Life, just there to demonstrate what the Source Engine can do. There's plenty of demand for a Half-Life 2 remaster, so I guess the sequel to Half-Life Source could be Half-Life 2 Source 2. Just, you know, remake Half-Life 2 in Source 2. Actually, they could even do Half-Life 1 in Source 2. This one, not an amazing idea, I think, because it's something that fans already are kind of trying to do themselves. I'll give it another C tier. Okay, that is Half-Life Source. So next is Half-Life 2, I think. Yeah, Half-Life 2. It already has a sequel, Episode 1. So instead, I will suggest a new spin off for it. How about Ravenholm? So Ravenholm is remembered as one of the best parts of Half-Life 2, and it's actually something that Valve thought about doing more with. They, at one point, were working with Arcane Studios to make a Half-Life 2 expansion set entirely in Ravenholm. And in this, Adrian Shepard from Opposing Force would meet Father Grigori, and they would do some experiments on the zombies. They would fight some zombie monkeys. Um, Definitely take a look at No Clip's documentary because there's a lot we know about this one, and it's a really interesting canceled game that almost released. It got pretty far, it seems. It's an hour-long documentary, really interesting to watch. Definitely go check it out. So this one, yeah, I'll give it A tier. A tier. I think there's definitely people who would want to play this. Okay, next is Half-Life 2 Deathmatch. I will be taking the exact same approach here as I did with Deathmatch Classic. Make it a celebration of Source Engine stuff. So, put in things from Team Fortress, from Counter Strike, from Portal, from Left 4 Dead, all in a single game. A celebration of weapons, characters, maps from Source Engine games. Uh, that would be, I think, a ton of fun. I also think it's a bit similar to something people have already done. Um, so maybe not. I'll give it B tier. Okay. Next is the Lost Coast. Half-Life 2 Lost Coast. It was a tech demo released shortly after Half-Life 2. It was a cut level from the Highway 17 section, and it's super short because it's meant to demonstrate the high dynamic range that was just added into Source right after Half-Life 2's release. It was just ideas they were going to carry into their next games, like, Half-Life 2, Episode 1, Episode 2. And for a sequel to this one, I think just, find some other interesting piece of technology that Valve's been working with and package that up in a small tech demo. It's kind of what Valve does with, like, the lab and with Desk Job, so kind of already a thing Valve's been doing. I'll give this one B tier. B tier, because I think it would be exciting, it would be fun, and it actually has a good chance of happening, because it kind of already has. So then, next one, we have Half-Life 2 Episode 1. Now, most of Half-Life expansions and such follow the point of view of Black Mesa incident survivors. But Episode 1 is a bit different, because we're still following Gordon Freeman and his whole point of view in that story, but we also see plenty of Combine soldiers fleeing City 17 before the Citadel's explosion. So, what if we made a game for one of those characters? Give it a cheesy name like the others, maybe Uncivil Protection. Such a game might drop some new lore about the Combine, the advisors, and the fate of Dr. Breen. So there's room for something really interesting here, I think. I'll give this one A tier. A tier. Okay, now there's episode 2, and the follow up for this one is really obvious. What Valve needs to do is make a prequel game that follows Alex, and it resolves the episode 2 cliffhanger by completely retconning it and giving us tons of entirely new questions. Then they need to put the game in VR, actually VR only while they're at it. Okay, in all seriousness, what they should actually do is find a way to expand on episode 2 without resolving the cliffhanger, because I feel like after all this time, it shouldn't be a small episodic game that follows episode 2. It should be a big, proper Half-Life game, a proper Half-Life 3. So, in that case, the sequel to episode 2 might just be a different spin off. Maybe this one could follow Judith Mossman as she's looking for the Borealis, and it could end on a different cliffhanger, which then this cliffhanger and episode two's cliffhanger both get resolved in the later Half-Life 3. Um, yeah, this could be a really interesting idea. I'll give this one A tier. Sure, yeah, A tier. Let's do it. Now for something completely different. So long as Valve can keep inventing new puzzle mechanics, there's plenty of room for games in the Portal series. Portal was not originally meant to be the start of a series. It was meant to be a large tech demo to go along with the Orange Box. So a spiritual successor to Portal might be some kind of short experimental game with a unique puzzle mechanic. Valve probably has a lot of ideas that they are just keeping secret. So, Portal 2 actually started early development focusing on an idea called f-stop, which somehow involved perspective, and it might have played similar to Superliminal. It's a game you can find on Steam, really great, go ahead and play it. But Valve has likely developed several other ideas, which could be made into short games like Portal. So, yeah, let's do a different, unique puzzle game in the Portal universe. A tier. Now, to finish off the Orange Box, we have Team Fortress 2. And for a sequel to TF2, I think the community would mostly just appreciate some new anti-cheat measures to deal with the bots, along with some new content for TF2, and a newer engine would also help. I don't know that we need a proper Team Fortress 3 right now. TF2 is very different from its predecessors in its art style, so I do wonder if a TF3 were to happen, maybe it should go in an entirely new direction. The early development of TF2 did consider an alien invasion angle, so maybe that could be revisited. To be honest, I haven't played TF2 that much, so it's not something I'm super excited for, but I think it could be fun for other people, so I'll give it B tier. Okay, so the last three games were Half-Life 2 Episode 2, Portal, and Team Fortress 2, and they were all bundled together in the Orange Box. Since Valve mostly publishes games through Steam these days rather than a disc, I don't think we'll see that happen again. The Orange Box was mostly a marketing tool, lumping three smaller projects into a larger thing, along with one large game, to hopefully get people to try TF2 and Portal. And I think it was very successful for the time, but since these games are mostly sold digitally now, and Valve's multiplayer games are all free to play, I don't think it will ever happen again. If it did, I think a multiplayer game with some kind of early access could be fun to combine with a new Portal-esque game, and then finally some spin-off single-player game like one of the ones we've described so far. So maybe call that the Purple Box. Again, I don't know if it would work in the modern day so well, so I'll give it like C tier. Okay, next is Left 4 Dead, and I have to admit, much like Team Fortress, I'm not a huge Left 4 Dead fan. However, that does not mean I'm going to completely skip it. Left 4 Dead and its sequel, Left 4 Dead 2, are so similar, and they were released so close together, that I feel like I should just do one sequel for the two of them. So, Left 4 Dead 3. It has existed in Valve for a very long time in some form or another, and it was used for prototyping the Source 2 engine. A source who spoke to Tyler McVicker claimed that Left 4 Dead 3 got so far into development that it could have been released in early access, only needing some polishing, art improvements, and audio. It might have been an open world game set in Morocco, there might have been a day-night cycle, and it seems the only reason it didn't release was because of office politics, which is a bit of a trend for Valve. Source 2 was apparently missing some very critical features that made it impossible to finish some projects, and Left 4 Dead 3 languished for years because of this. Some of those engine issues have probably been fixed by now, but I doubt it's all of them. If the will to make Left 4 Dead 3 exists and the politics are resolved enough, then yeah, it could totally happen in the future. Again, I'm not a huge Left 4 Dead fan, so I'm not personally excited for the idea, but I'll give it B tier, sure. Okay, next is Alien Swarm, which is a game that most people probably forget that Valve made. Still, the top two reviews for Alien Swarm right now are both comparing it to Helldivers. And since this game and the community expansion Reactive Drop seem to emphasize workshop content, I'm not sure how much demand there is for a sequel. I'm sure if Valve wants to, they could make some kind of major update that could get some attention, but I doubt Valve has the will to do it. So, for this one, I'm sorry, but D tier. Okay, next is Portal 2, and it's a curious situation because it's a game that I personally do not think needs a direct sequel, or at least not one that continues Chell's story. That said, Portal as a franchise has infinite potential. Now, the writers of Portal 2 say that they have their own idea for what Portal 3 might be, but I don't know what that idea is, so I'm going in my own direction. And that is to cross over with Half-Life. You might know that Epistle 3 is a short story by Mark Laidlaw, a former writer for the Half-Life games, and it contains some story ideas meant for Half-Life 2 Episode 3. This isn't Episode 3's actual plot, it's just one version of what might have been. Epistle 3 does touch on Half-Life's connection to the Portal games in a way that I think leaves open a very interesting spin-off, maybe a Portal 2 prequel. There could be a hybrid Half-Life Portal spin-off game, maybe even a competitive multiplayer game, that features scientists at Aperture fighting asymmetrically to keep the Combine from stealing the Borealis. Since GLaDOS is supposed to have killed off most of, if not all of the scientists before the Combine invasion, I suspect it would actually be robots fighting the Combine instead. Also, since GLaDOS and the Overwatch would be commanding the Aperture and Combine forces respectively, that means that Ellen McLean would be voicing the announcer on each side, but as a different character. Actually, hold up, I have a theory about this one, and I've been wanting to talk about it for a while. Half-Life and Portal have a shared universe. This is already very well known. But we've only ever heard Ellen McLean as the Overwatch voice in games set after Portal. GLaDOS talks as if she's protecting Aperture from someone.
I have an infinite capacity for knowledge, and even I'm not sure what's going on outside. All I know is I'm the only thing standing between us and them. Well, I was. Unless you have a plan for building some supercomputer parts in a big hurry, this place isn't going to be safe much longer.
If we killed GLaDOS at the end of Portal, then Aperture was vulnerable to the Combine between Portal 1 and 2. GLaDOS was in pieces in a parking lot at the end of Portal 1, but she seems almost entirely intact and plugged in by the second game. So someone definitely rebuilt and moved GLaDOS between these games. And I think it was the Combine. They may have downloaded what they could from GLaDOS, including information about the Borealis, and then used GLaDOS as the basis for the Overwatch commander. Two AI characters in the same universe who have the same voice actress and the same disregard for human life. Come on, they have to be related. Okay, theory over. But if I'm right, then the Overwatch should have a different voice before Portal, if the Overwatch even exists. And it would also have a different voice during this spin off game, so it couldn't be voiced by Ellen McLean. I could see this as being either or even both a single player and multiplayer game, with the single player campaign from the perspective of Aperture robots commanded by GLaDOS, and then the competitive multiplayer being, both perspectives. The single player campaign's ending might actually align with the moment where Chell kills GLaDOS at the end of Portal, and this could cause the robots defending Aperture to lose their coordination or their organization since their commander is dead, and that could be kind of the ending. Then we might have some kind of cutscene that shows the Combine technicians attempting to reconstruct GLaDOS and then download her data. That could be, I think, a very interesting story to tell. So, okay, no, I'm giving this one S tier. This is S tier. I want this. Valve, please make this. It's not gonna happen, but I wish it could. So, after Portal 2, Valve did not make a single player game for a long time. So the next game is CS:GO, and we have a sequel for that one. It's Counter-Strike 2. But you might not know that CS:GO was originally meant as a console port of Counter-Strike Source. That's why it used the mouse wheel for selecting your gear. It was more friendly for joysticks. So CS2 is not available for consoles, and it wouldn't surprise me if it never comes to consoles at all. If we're trying to imagine a CS:GO, then maybe the sequel to CS:GO is a console version of CS2. That might be a boring answer, but it makes sense. Um, since it wouldn't be very interesting and there's a low chance of it happening, I have to give it D tier, but it makes sense. The next few releases actually have either really short answers or I'm skipping them entirely, so let's make it a lightning round. Dota 2, I know next to nothing about it, except that it's still popular and it gets active updates, so skipping it. Next is The Lab. It's basically a VR tech demo, so when Valve makes their next VR headset, they could just make another lab. B tier. Next, I'm skipping Artifact because I haven't played it and I don't know enough about Dota to cover its spin offs. Ditto for Dota Underlords, also. Okay, that brings us to Half-Life Alyx. That took us long enough. This is a half-hour video. Oh dear. Okay. We're finally here. I think it's very clear that Valve intends Alyx to be leading us towards an eventual Half-Life 3. If that ever happens. um, but I think there's also some talk of a VR follow-up to Alyx, perhaps following Barney Calhoun. I don't think I can begin to speculate on the plot for the next major Half-Life game, but it might be interesting if it had two different campaigns, a traditional desktop one for Gordon Freeman and a VR one for Alyx. That, I think, could actually be a very interesting setup for a co-op mode too. So, yeah, uh, A tier for that one. That would be fun. No, actually S tier because it's Half-Life 3 and I want Half-Life 3, please. All right, next one is Aperture Desk Job, which is all the proof you need that Portal is Valve's favorite IP for tech demos. It works well for them, and since the lore of Portal is very flexible for whatever kind of game you want to make, um, or whatever plot you feel like you need, I remember people saying that this game was proof Valve still has the writing talent they had for Portal 2, and it makes the lack of new single player content all the more painful. If the rumors about a new VR headset are true, then I would love to see a new Aperture themed game for it, just to show off what it can do. Okay, last game. Counter-Strike 2 is Valve's most recent release, and it also replaces CSGO, so you might argue it's just the same game in a different engine. It does change the Counter-Strike formula a bit with the volumetric smokes and such. I do feel like it's a bit weird to call it Counter-Strike 2 since it's mostly just global offensive with a new engine. So, what do I want from a sequel? I just want more maps, please. More maps and more game modes, and maybe make multiplayer a bit easier to set up with your friends. Thanks. We probably don't need a new CS game right now, so I'll put this one in D tier. All right, that's the tier list done. Um, Maybe I did this wrong. I don't know. You tell me. Tell me what you think in the comments, and I will try to read all of them. Also, there are 4 other videos on this channel that I've posted at about the same time, so yeah, tell me what you think. See you next time.